Hi, I'm Johnny Price, and you're listening to Adventure Capital, a podcast by Wefunder. Every couple of weeks, we speak with a founder who's raised capital from investors on the Wefunder platform, or some other maven or maverick in the equity crowdfunding universe. And on the subject of the universe, today we're speaking with Erik Franks, the founder and CEO of Tesseract, who are building higher performance, cheaper propulsion systems for satellites. Tesseract graduated from Y Combinator and a few months later raised $929K from 1,200 investors on the Wefunder platform. If you want to learn whether satellites ever crash in space or what could go wrong when you buy a second-hand airplane and attempt to fly it, please do listen on.
Hey, Erik, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Great. Thanks for having me.
For sure. To get us kicked off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do at Tesseract?
Hi, Tesseract builds in-space propulsion systems based upon our new green propellant technology. With investor funding, we've demonstrated the highest performance green propulsion that's ever been built. Tesseract's propulsion systems are about 1,000 times higher thrust than the electric options that are out there. And we have contracts with companies sending missions to the moon and are also developing propulsion systems for satellites and orbital tugs that allow you to maneuver your satellites in orbit once you get there. Launch vehicles like SpaceX drop satellites off, often far away from where they actually want to end up for revenue-generating orbits. And that can be as far as 10,000 miles, and we allow them to get there very quickly.
Amazing. And when you say green propulsion, what do you mean by that?
So green propulsion is different than the traditional very toxic propellants that are used, such as hydrazine is the common one. It was developed by the U.S. military back in the 1950s, and because of the conservative approach of many customers in the space business, you're spending $300-500 million per satellite in the past. They would anything that's been demonstrated in space, they keep on going for decades and decades. So innovation has been very slow, and we're hoping to be the disruption to that industry.
Wow. What's your background, Erik? How did you come to launch the company? No pun intended.
Sure, absolutely. So, back in undergrad, I studied computer science and economics. And right out of school, I started my first company, and that was an online bookstore selling books on Amazon and eBay and places like that. I was completely bootstrapped because I didn't understand fundraising or even that was an option. It was simply kind of credit card financed. And that fortunately worked out well. The startup grew to 50 employees, shipped millions of books. But I realized that my passion was really in aerospace. So I started with the aero part of that and built my first airplane. Took a couple of years, had a Corvette engine on the back, and worked really well, and sold it to a person in Spain that actually flew it out there.
Wow.
And then that basically funded me getting my master's at the International Space University in France, which allowed me to transition into the industry. It's also
Hey,
where
Erik, can we
my
just pause a little bit about?
Yeah, sorry.
Can we just pause a little bit on you made an airplane? What?
Sure.
How? That seems like a really hard thing to do. So, but in just a few years, you made an airplane. What does it take to make an airplane?
Sure. So it's surprisingly not as hard as it sounds. There's really good resources online and a great community. Exactly. There's a group called the Experimental Aviation Group that has their Oshkosh Air Venture convention going on right now, and there's literally hundreds of thousands of people attending up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin right now. And they're a community of builders that just sit around in their garages and build entire airplanes, and then bring them out to the airport, hop in, and go fly them around. So that was
wow.
That was an exciting thing. Yeah, it's
that must be scary when the airplane that you built. If I built an airplane in my garage, I would not trust myself to take it up.
No.
I might taxi it around on the runway.
In this world, there are the people in Oshkosh who fly their homemade airplanes.
Yeah.
There's everyone else.
Yeah, it's quite an adventure. Just a quick story about that. So we got into the Y Combinator accelerator, and unfortunately, briefly after that, I bought an airplane, an amateur-built airplane, but I bought it kind of assembled, but it was a little bit of a mess. So I fixed a lot of things, but I apparently didn't fix enough. So I actually had an airplane accident up at the Mojave Spaceport, and I was in the hospital for 2 months at the YC accelerator. So I just got to see the last month of it, unfortunately.
What?
So it's quite an adventure.
Wow.
What can you tell us more about that? I mean, you're laughing about it, so I guess you're like okay to talk about it. When you say airplane accident, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it was actually really touch and go there. Yeah, I broke a couple vertebrae, broke both ankles, smashed my head pretty aggressively, and lost about 3 weeks of long-term memory. I was just in the hospital, not knowing about conversations 4 hours ago. So fortunately, I'm better now, I think. But
wow,
it's come a long way.
That is insane. Yeah. Well, I want to say, way to get back on the horse.
Yeah,
most people, most people wouldn't have had the idea to build their own airplane in the first place, but having had a aviation crash to say, well, that's not going to put me off. Actually, let's go higher with space and satellites.
Buying a second-hand amateur built was a little risky, so I'm going to try to avoid doing that in the future.
Wow. That's just an incredible story. I mean, we wanted to ask about the Y Combinator experience. It sounds like yours was somewhat curtailed, but I think you're the first founder we've had on the podcast that went through YC. So can you talk a little bit about what that was like, if you can remember it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of viewing it from afar due to the accident and being in the hospital, but my colleagues, my two co-founders, went to the Mountain View campus and we're part of a group of almost 200 people, other co-founders in the summer 2017 batch. It's really an incredible experience, and you end up at meetings with some of the biggest startup founders in the world that are kind of further along in that journey and learning from all the lessons that they've learned from literally thousands of companies that have gone through Y Combinator. They've kind of seen every mistake done with funding, with employee relations, and customer development. So really an incredible wealth of knowledge. And what's nice is that after the 3-month program, they continue to support you and you can get office hours whenever you want. And of course, the introductions to investors are incredible.
Yeah, our company went through Y Combinator and we talked to a decent number of founders who also go through YC, and it's just the most coveted accelerator and adds so much value. If you could boil it down to like one or two takeaways that you got from YC that you would share with somebody looking to either apply or what would those things be?
Yeah, I think their byline is pretty much make something people want. They give you T-shirts that say that, and it's really critical to look in the mirror at those shirts while you're wearing them and make sure that you're really building something that your customers are desperately interested in. And that's something that we've really focused on. You've got to do a lot of customer discovery to learn what people want or have experienced that yourself, and then going and building it. The fact that it doesn't exist means that it's going to be challenging to do a lot of the time. And we spend a lot of time. Go ahead.
For a consumer-facing platform or for a software company, that customer discovery, building something people want, it's a lot easier, right? There's rapid iteration.
Right.
You can kind of quickly, evaluate by whether or not people are using the product. For you guys, given the massive capex and like investment and the long time horizon, how do you do that? How do you figure out what customers want far away from actually being able to deliver on a product?
Right. That's been a real challenge in customer understanding. And one of the ways that we've done that is that we are from the aerospace field. We've seen the challenges. We've worked on space shuttle at NASA, at Virgin Orbit, at Space Systems Loral, which is the biggest satellite builder on Earth, Aerojet, Northrop. just down the line. We've really seen it internally from these companies. And then we also go to space conferences around the country and world to talk to those customers and continue to build the relationship. Networking is really critical in this field because there aren't so many companies. It's not consumers that you have to reach. It's big aerospace companies, new and old.
Got it. So you talked a little bit about how you guys are shifting space tech into like the modern day and age. What do you think the future holds for space tech and for Tesseract? How do you guys fit into that picture?
Great. It's a huge change that's coming in for this industry. It's finally having a shift from 1960s technology when the space age started. A lot of those same technologies and even part numbers are still being used. And what's really changed is the kind of SpaceX bringing the cost of launch down and then the movement to small satellites. Currently, there's about 1,500 satellites in orbit, and we're forecast to have 20,000 satellites in the next 10 years. That's a lot of new satellites at a large scale that's never occurred before. Pretty much before, it was NASA and the European Space Agency that were doing that. They were the only ones. Countries could afford these space missions. Now it's democratizing space for all of us. And Moore's law has brought down the cost of kind of every other component in the satellites. Propulsion really hasn't seen that advantage, and that's what Tesseract is offering. Is there's a lot of technology that has developed in the last 15, 60 years, and we're bringing that to bear.
Wow, that's really, really exciting. Maybe shifting gears a little to talk about the Wefunder raise that you guys did. Firstly, why did you decide to raise capital in Wefunder? You graduated from Y Combinator. I'm sure you had a lot of institutional investors that were interested. This is a relatively unconventional way to raise capital. Why did you choose to go with the equity crowdfunding route?
Right. After Y Combinator's demo day, where we presented to kind of the largest congregation of institutional and angel investors in the world that assemble twice a year, we had a lot of meetings. We had over 100 different investors that we were talking to, and we did raise from many of them. But some of the feedback that we heard was that we needed to get to contracts and develop the technology just a little bit more. And that's what we've done with the investment from Wefunder, and we've also gotten strategic investment from some of our first customers. Wefunder is a YC company, and we spoke with Wefunder, and we're really excited about the kind of democratizing access to early stage space investments. There haven't been too many companies that people could get in on, and there's so much excitement for space technology. And we've really, really been happy with talking to investors in our Wefunder campaign.
Yeah, I think the Moonshot kind of whole idea is one of the three buckets that we find funds really well on Wefunder. And I think space specifically, like so many people just love space, and everyone wanted to be an astronaut at some point in their childhood. Right. So this allows them to have like one little piece of space that they're a part of. How did you go about executing on the campaign? Like, what were some of the things that you did to get investors?
Wefunder was really critical to that. We worked with our storyteller at Wefunder to develop our page. When aerospace people, they sometimes speak in lingo, and there's a lot of terminology that would be really difficult to kind of share with the broader community that aren't engineers in this field. So I think that they helped to kind of translate that to something that the public would be interested in, and that incredibly resonated for us. We did one telephone call interview, and then kind of did a little bit of back and forth, but the story came out just incredible. And it was really quick and easy to get set up. So we're very happy with working with Wefunder.
Awesome. And then in terms of kind of marketing the campaign or getting the word out, what kind of tactics did you employ there?
So it we really didn't do much to promote the campaign ourselves. We were working through some challenges with a previous employer that they had some questions, and we were resolving that with them. So we didn't want to raise too much information out in the community about what we were working on. So we were kind of staying in stealth mode, and it was simply the large Wefunder community and sending the newsletters out that really resonated. We didn't really have a social media presence. It was really all Wefunder, and the amazing story that was put together in the community, the newsletter distribution list.
Awesome. Yeah, what was your experience like raising capital from the Wefunder network in terms of like the conversations that you had while you were raising, and afterwards in your updates that you've been consistently sending to your supporters now?
Right. Yeah, from the first day we were getting email notifications of investments, and it was really fun to see those coming across. The first day you'd get several emails, and then more and more and more as we had over 1,200 investors that were part of our crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding, and that's just been an incredible community. We've gotten so many questions and people that are excited about space, and they bring up kind of updates in the news and competitors, and they want to know more about how we fit into the landscape. And so we've been really engaged, and we've been sending monthly updates, and it's just been a great community for us. And the supporters have been great. We have investors come out to our shop all the time.
Do you have any cool stories or examples of connections you've made, or ways in which your Wefunder investors have looked to help you?
Yeah, we've had investors out to our shop at our test site out in Livermore, California. We actually have a test site for our rockets, and we fire them out at the little airport out here. They've been an amazing asset, and one kind of fun example is one of the investors is a graphic designer, and he's been helping us with our pitch deck, getting that ready to talk to investors, as well as trade show signage and kind of all kinds of things that we're working on, really putting on a good face for the company. And that's very coordinating with one of our investors.
That's awesome. And then for any listeners, they can come watch your rockets launch in North Hills, California. Is that where you guys are based still?
Yeah, so we're actually, we moved up to Livermore, California. So that's near the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and just about 20 miles outside of Silicon Valley. It's actually very close to a lot of interesting space companies. So when we're hiring, that really helps. And we're kind of just far enough outside the city that they allow us to do fun things like firing rockets at their airport. So it's been good.
Awesome. This is a weird aside. I learned the other day that there's a chemical element called livermorium. And I imagine, given what you just said, if that was like discovered at the Livermore lab. Anyway.
Yeah, they've got a couple different nuclear research reactors nearby. It's really quite an interesting place.
It's all happening in Livermore, guys. If you're a scientist, get to Livermore quick.
Yeah, it's apparently got some of the largest quantity of PhDs in the world.
Season 3.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so to wrap up here, 2 questions that we ask at the end of every podcast episode. Can you share with us one piece of advice for someone who's running or considering running an equity crowdfunding campaign? And then one piece of advice more generally for someone looking to start a startup in the space sector?
Yeah, I think working with your Wefunder storyteller was extremely helpful for us. Really sharing your excitement for the business opportunity and your expertise in executing on that was great for us. And then kind of advice for someone trying to get into this is find a pain point in the industry that you're looking into and make it go away. Going back to YC's motto is make something people want. And customer discovery is a big part of doing that, and people will tell you if you ask.
That's awesome. And also beware of secondhand aircraft.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
one last bonus question, which we may cut if it's a dumb question. But you said that the number of satellites are expected to be upwards of 20,000, I think, earlier.
Right.
Can satellites ever run into each other? Like, are there satellite accidents?
No, there totally are. There was a Russian satellite, Cosmos, that ran into another country's kind of active satellite. And the challenge with the Russian satellite was that it kind of retired. They turned off all the systems. But
Whoa.
if you're zooming around at 17,000 miles per hour, you can have very bad days when things run into each other. And so that has happened.
Surely space is like so big. Space is pretty big.
It is.
Place. Like, I would have thought that the probability of like two satellites running into each other, even like when the number's much bigger than 20,000, would be infinitesimally small. Maybe if they're all on the same like axis,
I wish it was.
Then, yeah.
Yeah, it really is a big challenge, and that's one of the reasons that people are so excited about what we're doing, is that having rockets to allow you to maneuver and get out of the way is absolutely critical. People that are operating those 1,500 satellites today, they regularly get alerts from the U.S. military that is kind of being the traffic cop, and they're telling them, get out of the way, you need to maneuver, or you're going to run into each other, and that happens all day, every day.
Wow. Well, we could talk about this all day, every day. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us, Erik. Really enjoyed it. And we'll see you around soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have a great day.
Adventure Capital is brought to you by your fundraising team here at Wefunder, which consists of Johnny Price, Katie Powers, and myself, Oliver Foyahan. We'll be sharing the adventures of one of our Wefunder founders every other week. If you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, or would just like to find out more about Wefunder or our founders, don't hesitate to contact us at hello@wefunder.com. We'll see you next time.